Hi, my name's Maribel, and my husband called me boring. Not during a fight, not in private, but at a dinner party, in front of everyone. They laughed, I smiled, but inside something cracked, and something else began to burn. 2 nights later, I walked in on him and his mistress, inside my penthouse, the same one I paid for, the one I designed, brick by brick. And when I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "This house is mine," he almost fainted. He had no idea what I was about to do next. Have you ever been so invisible? They thought you'd never fight back? Well, I did, and it changed everything. But before we get into it, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? What time is it where you are? Drop a comment below. I'd love to know who's out there with me. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and garlic, Orville's favorite. The roast was almost done, and I'd already set the table. 3 place settings. Orville had texted me earlier. Having dinner with a couple of folks from work, hope that's okay. There was no please, no offer to pick up something on the way. Just a flat notice like I was the staff, not his wife. I adjusted the silverware, again, and glanced at the oven timer. 15 minutes left. I caught my reflection in the window, the skyline of Manhattan sparkling behind me. I looked fine. A little tired, maybe. Lipstick still fresh. I'd changed into a soft navy dress, something simple but flattering. I didn't dress up for him much anymore, but tonight I had tried. Silly, I guess. Even after everything, a part of me still wanted to be noticed. I leaned on the kitchen island and absent-mindedly picked up the silver pen resting next to the salt cellar. My father's pen. I'd carried it with me through college, through law school, even when I left the firm to help Orville start his agency. It used to sit on my desk like a small reminder that I mattered. Now, I didn't have a desk. I had a husband who barely looked me in the eye. The elevator dinged. Voices echoed in the hallway. I quickly tucked the pen into the drawer and straightened my shoulders. Smile. Be gracious. Orville walked in with 2 men trailing behind him. One was Robert, someone I'd seen at past work events. The other was younger, unfamiliar, with that slick, eager energy I used to find charming in new hires. Now, it just made me tired. "Gentlemen," I said with a nod. "Welcome." "Smells amazing in here," Robert said, flashing me a warm smile. I gestured toward the dining room. "Dinner's ready." We sat, and for the next half hour, the table filled with the sounds of clinking glasses and stories I wasn't part of. I served the roast, poured the wine, asked polite questions. They barely noticed. I was clearing dessert plates when it happened. They were mid-conversation, something about a pitch gone sideways, when Orville leaned back in his chair and said with a chuckle, "You know, Maribel used to be fun at these things. Now she's more like background noise. Beautiful, but kind of boring." I stopped in place. My hand gripped the edge of the plate. Robert gave a tight laugh. The younger man smirked and looked down. No one defended me. No one even met my eyes. Except Orville, who kept sipping his wine like he hadn't just carved me open with a dull blade. I forced a small laugh, then turned toward the kitchen. As soon as I was out of their line of sight, I leaned against the counter and let out a slow breath. My fingers found the silver pen again, hidden in the drawer. I gripped it hard enough that the metal bit into my palm. I didn't cry. I just stood there, holding that pen like a tether. Later, after they left and the apartment fell silent, I began rinsing wine glasses. Orville came in, loosened his tie, and leaned against the doorway like nothing had happened. "I have to go to Chicago Thursday. Client thing, probably back Monday." I nodded without looking at him. "Which client?" He shrugged. "You don't know them. New lead." The lie was so smooth I almost admired it. But something in the way he said it, too casual, too prepared, put me on edge. I didn't push. I never did. That was the unspoken rule in our marriage. Keep things calm, don't ask questions, don't cause waves. Keep the peace, even when it's killing you. That night, while folding the laundry he'd dropped near the hamper, never in it, I found a folded brochure in the pocket of his suit jacket. It wasn't for Chicago. It was for the Windmere Resort Spa in Hilton Head. Oceanfront. Couples package. The kind of place you go to fall back in love or have an affair. I sat on the edge of the bed, brochure open in my lap, my thumb tracing the edge of the glossy paper. Waves crashing, couples holding hands, champagne on balconies. My stomach didn't drop, my heart didn't race. I just knew this wasn't new. It was just confirmed. For years, I'd made myself smaller to keep things together. I thought if I didn't rock the boat, I wouldn't drown. But now I realized I was already underwater. And as I held that hotel brochure in my hand, a cold certainty began to grow inside me. He wasn't going away for business. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the soft whir of the city outside pressing into the windows. Every so often, I'd shift, trying to get comfortable, but the weight of that hotel brochure sat heavier than any blanket. Orville's laughter at dinner replayed in my head, looped like a cruel joke. Boring, he'd said, like I was an accessory, nice enough but outdated. At some point near dawn, I got up and made coffee. I sat in the kitchen, the same place where I'd cooked that dinner just hours before, and stared into my mug as if the answers might float to the surface. Nothing did. But a new silence had settled inside me. Not defeat, not yet. More like something waiting, watching. By mid-morning, I went through the motions. I answered emails, called my sister about a weekend plan I had no intention of keeping, even booked a hair appointment I'd probably cancel. On the outside, everything looked calm. Inside, I was charting a storm. Around 2 p.m., I grabbed my keys and told the doorman I was heading to the art gallery downtown. But I didn't go there. I circled the block, waited 10 minutes in a nearby cafe, then came back through the service elevator, silent as smoke. I wanted to see something. I needed proof, not just paper, but something undeniable. I entered the penthouse with the quiet ease of someone who knows every creaky board, every shadow. The place was empty, or so I thought. I moved slowly through the hallway, pausing in the living room. The cushions were still fluffed from the night before. Everything looked untouched. Then I heard it. A laugh. Not Orville's. A woman's. I froze behind the corner of the entryway wall. He brought her here. I heard their voices before I saw them. Orville's tone was light, teasing. Hers was louder, more performative. I peeked around the corner. They stood by the window, framed by the skyline. She was tall, younger, dressed in one of those too expensive to look casual outfits. Her heels clicked against the floor like punctuation marks. She walked toward the open bar, poured herself a drink like she'd done it before. Comfortable, confident. Then I heard her say it. "It's crazy how fast we made this place ours. I mean, the vibe. So us." Orville didn't correct her. She ran her fingers along the edge of the glass coffee table I had custom-made 2 years ago, then tapped the abstract painting above the fireplace. "Told you this was the perfect choice. Warm tones. Rich, but not try-hard. I've got an eye for this stuff." Orville nodded. "You do." That painting? I spent weeks hunting it down. It was the last piece my father helped me select before he passed. The color palette, the artist, the placement. It was ours. Mine and his. A quiet nod to our bond. And now it was being repackaged as someone else's idea. I stood there, tucked behind the hallway, holding my breath like a child hiding from thunder. Ivana. I'd heard the name once, a passing mention. I hadn't imagined her walking barefoot on the hardwood floors I paid to restore. I hadn't imagined her sipping wine from my mother's crystal glasses, smirking at Orville like she'd won a prize. She talked about my lighting choices, my drapes, even the custom backsplash I spent 3 months designing. And each time she took credit, Orville said nothing. No correction. No mention of me. It was like I never existed. I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. Each step away from them felt like peeling off a layer of skin. When I reached the front door, I paused and glanced back. From that angle, they looked like a couple in a magazine spread. Successful, stylish, made for each other. It was an illusion. A pretty stolen one. I made it to the elevator, down to the garage. My hands shook as I unlocked the car. I sat in the driver's seat and just sat. Let the air settle. Let the silence stretch. Then I reached into my coat pocket and felt it. The silver pen. My father's. Solid. Familiar. I clutched it hard and whispered, "I will not be erased." The car was still running. My hand was still wrapped around the pen like it was the only solid thing I could hold on to. Then my phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen. "Ivana, thank you for making my dream penthouse come true. Everything feels perfect." I blinked. The message wasn't meant for me. She must have sent it to Orville and accidentally included me. Or maybe she had no idea this number belonged to me. Either way, it hit like a slap I didn't see coming. My thumb hovered over the screen, frozen. My breath caught halfway to my lungs. I didn't respond. I didn't delete it. I just stared at that little heart emoji, glowing with the kind of smug intimacy that didn't belong to me anymore. If it ever had. I drove. Not home. Not to anywhere in particular. Just away. Ended up in front of the building where the foundation offices were. My father's name still carved on the brass plaque beside the door. The Thomas M. Ellis Foundation. Legacy. Family. Truth be told, I hadn't set foot in the place in months, not since Orville said it was more dignified for me to step back. Said it gently, like he was doing me a favor. I sat in the cafe across the street instead, ordered a coffee I barely tasted, flipped through a digital copy of the latest charity magazine on my tablet, one of those glossy issues showcasing philanthropic success. There it was. A whole spread on the Foundation's latest projects. A full-page quote from Orville. A mention of Ivana in the donor acknowledgments. My name? Nowhere. I had organized those projects, set up the grants, pitched to every donor listed. I had stayed up late creating proposals when Orville was out networking. Ivana had never even seen the inside of our boardroom, but there she was, immortalized in print, while I had been scrubbed clean from the story like a smudge on glass. I closed the tablet and stared out the window, past the streetlights flickering in the early dusk. That hollow feeling in my chest, it wasn't sadness anymore. It was something sharper. A voice behind me broke my trance. A young woman, barely out of college by the look of her, stood by the corner table with a stack of reports in her arms. "I stayed late last night, got those revisions in before midnight," she said. The man she was talking to didn't look up. "You're good with spreadsheets. That's why we keep you around. Paperwork, girl." He said it with a chuckle, like it was a compliment. She laughed politely, but I saw the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and suddenly I saw myself, 2 decades ago, sitting just like her. Overdressed, overprepared, overlooked, always polite, always helpful, never the one with the mic in her hand, never the one in the pictures. I could have spoken up. Told her not to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. Told her they'd take everything from her if she let them. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I left a generous tip and walked out. Back at home, I sat on the bed with a legal pad, my old laptop, and a rising fire in my chest. If they were going to steal the life I built, my space, my story, my legacy, then the least I could do was take it all back, piece by piece. I started documenting. Screenshots of texts, photographs of the foundation reports I still had access to, notes on Ivana's claims, what she said, where she said it. Contracts I'd co-signed years ago that still had my name buried in the fine print. I didn't know what I'd do with all of it yet, but I knew it mattered. Every paperclip of it. Hours passed without me noticing. The sky outside the windows went from blue to gray to black. I made a sandwich, didn't eat it, checked my email, didn't care. By 10, I pulled my journal from the nightstand. The leather cover was worn smooth at the edges, a gift from my father the year I passed the bar. I hadn't written in it for weeks. Tonight, I opened to a fresh page and wrote one sentence in capital letters, underlined twice. If they call me boring, let them. Boring builds empires. The next morning, a single text buzzed on my phone before the sun had fully risen. Dinner at Del Frisco's tonight. Just family and a few friends. Hope you can make it. It was from Orville. No explanation, no time listed, no courtesy. I read it twice, then checked the time. 7:42 a.m. By 9, I'd confirmed the reservation myself. He had booked a private room, 16 guests. Clearly, this wasn't some last-minute plan. I was being handled. Again, I worked through the day on autopilot, barely registering meetings or emails. All I could think about was why now? Why this dinner? And why hadn't I been told sooner? By 5, I went home to change. My hands moved mechanically through my closet until they found a dark green silk blouse. The one Orville had once said made me look like I tried too hard. I wore it anyway. I wasn't dressing for him tonight. Traffic was steady on the way to the steakhouse. I parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the distance, hoping the warm September air might steady me. It didn't. When I stepped into the private room, my eyes went straight to the head of the long, polished table. There he was, Orville, laughing, charming, alive in a way I hadn't seen in years, but not for me. Next to him, seated proudly like some trophy propped up for display, was Ivana. She was wearing the sapphire earrings I'd bought myself after finishing the Denver project 5 years ago. I hadn't seen them in months. He must have taken them from the safe. "Maribel," Orville said with false warmth as he spotted me. "Glad you could join us." I smiled, tight. "Wouldn't miss it." A waitress motioned to my seat. It was 3 spots down from Orville, at the far end. Between me and him sat 2 of his law partners and their wives. Meanwhile, Ivana was nestled close, her hand grazing his arm as she whispered something that made him smirk. Dinner progressed in waves of forced laughter and under-the-table tension. The room buzzed with the scent of charred steak and red wine. I caught my reflection in the wine glass, composed, hollow-eyed, present, but not included. Then came the comment. Someone had asked about the interior design of our Manhattan penthouse. Orville chuckled and said, "Well, you know how it is. Some people are great at decorating, not so much at actually living." The table erupted in scattered laughter. But not everyone. My cousin Elena, seated 2 chairs to my left, winced and looked down. Another aunt shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Ivana didn't laugh. She just reached for her glass, sipped slowly, then locked eyes with me. The server came around to top off our drinks. Orville stood. "I just want to make a quick toast," he said, "to new beginnings, fresh eyes and fresh energy to help with our projects." Ivana's been kind enough to lend her talents to redesigning some of our spaces. There it was, bold, open, in front of family. He wanted me to break, or disappear. I stood, slow and steady. The room quieted. I lifted my glass. "To new beginnings," I said, my voice calm but firm. "A house is only safe if its foundation holds. Some forget who poured the concrete." Silence. Orville's smile faltered. Ivana blinked. I took a sip, then sat down, folding my napkin neatly in my lap. Conversation resumed after a few long seconds, but the tone had shifted. The energy had dropped. Orville didn't look at me for the rest of the evening. As dessert arrived, mini crème brûlée arranged like little crowns, a soft tap on my elbow startled me. It was my cousin Elena, standing and preparing to leave. She leaned in, slipped a slim envelope into my hand, and whispered, "You should have this. I made copies months ago, just in case." She was gone before I could ask anything. I slipped the envelope into my purse, heart pounding. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, the contents of that envelope spread before me, photocopies of property deeds, each one bearing my full legal name, Maribel Hartman. I stared at them for a long while, not in shock, but in confirmation. These weren't just documents. They were reminders. This wasn't Orville's house. This wasn't Ivana's house. This was mine. By the time I got home from that dinner, the envelope had become more than a bundle of paper. It was a weight, a whisper, a dare. I placed it gently on the dining table, smoothed it open like a relic, and stared at each deed, one by one, laid out beneath the chandelier's soft glow. My name, my investment, my signature. My life, quiet but indelible, in black and white. And yet, they acted like I had never existed. I stood there for a long time, not moving, just listening, to the silence of the room, to the ticking of the old wall clock, to the sound of my own breathing growing shallow. It hit me then, fully, painfully. They want me gone, not just pushed to the side, but scrubbed clean from the history of everything I helped build. I sat down, rested my elbows on the table, and lowered my head into my hands. It was too much. My chest tightened, not from anger this time, but grief, the slow kind, the kind that drips like water onto stone. Years of choices, of saying yes, of making peace to keep peace. All of it, bulldozed. And still, I couldn't cry. Not at first. It took the memory of writing checks for Orville's projects, signing off on his second office space, covering shortfalls without ever asking for acknowledgement. It took the flashback of bringing sandwiches to contractors when we were still building the penthouse from scratch. It took remembering Ivana standing smug in a place I helped fund, wearing earrings I paid for, erasing me with a smile. Then I broke. I wasn't loud. I wasn't dramatic. I just folded in on myself, right there at the table, and the tears fell quietly onto the deeds I'd once thought would secure my place. Maybe it was all pointless. Maybe I should just walk away. Maybe silence was easier. I whispered it to the room like a confession. Maybe it's not worth it anymore. I wiped my face, stood, and began moving toward the hallway closet. If I was going to go, I'd need my passport, the small, safe envelope of cash I kept hidden, and a few clothes. I'd go quietly. No fights. No explanations. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my father's old writing desk, where I kept my travel documents. As I reached back, my fingers hit something thin and cold, tucked beneath the passport case. I pulled it out, a photo frame I hadn't seen in years. It was him. My father. Standing beside me in a hard hat, dirt on our shoes, beams of steel rising behind us. The day we broke ground on the penthouse. I must have been in my early 30s, flushed with pride, naive in the way only people who think love protects them can be. Behind the glass was a note, in his handwriting, "Never let anyone take what you've built." I sat down hard on the floor, the frame resting on my knees. The silver pen he'd given me, his pen, the one I used to sign most of those contracts, was clipped behind the frame. I hadn't realized I'd tucked it there. My fingers found it instinctively, wrapping around its weight. A wave of something unfamiliar surged inside me. It wasn't rage, not like before. It was steadier, colder, but alive. I didn't have to scream or storm out or make threats. I had proof. I had memory. I had names on deeds. I had my father's words in ink. I whispered into the quiet, "I won't disappear. Not this time." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor until the sun came up, watching light crawl slowly across the hardwood, like time reminding me it still moved forward. When my legs finally ached too much to sit, I stood, gathered the documents, and started a folder. I didn't know what I was going to do with it all yet, but I knew I'd use it. Somehow. Around 9, I made tea and opened my laptop, beginning to pull emails, invoices, receipts, anything that had my name, my work, my fingerprints. I wanted to be ready. Just after 11, my phone rang. I almost didn't pick up. But when I saw the name, James Lattimore, my lawyer, I answered. His voice was low but urgent. "Maribel, I need you to come in tomorrow morning." "What's going on?" "Something just landed on my desk. Something you're going to want to see." My grip tightened on the phone. The pen was still in my hand. I said nothing. I didn't need to. By the time I pulled into the parking garage of James Lattimore's law office, the sky had only just begun to lighten. Houston was still quiet, a soft mist hanging over the streets, like the city hadn't made up its mind yet about the day. Neither had I. The envelope of deeds was tucked inside my leather satchel, pressed flat between the lining and the folder I'd added the night before. Copies of emails, scanned invoices, and the first few screenshots I'd taken of Ivana's smug social media posts. I wasn't sure yet what I was building, but I knew what I wasn't going to let happen. James was already in his office when I arrived. He offered me coffee, which I declined. I didn't want comfort. I wanted clarity. I laid the documents on his desk without a word. He adjusted his glasses, brows rising slightly as he scanned the deeds. "These are real. You've had legal ownership this whole time." I nodded. "Yes." "And no one seemed to care." He exhaled slowly and reached into his drawer, pulling out a new folder. "This came in yesterday evening, quietly filed, but not quietly enough." He slid the papers toward me. I took them in hand, flipping through the pages. The trust was structured clean, strategically. My name was nowhere. Instead, there it was. Ivana Callahan Trust, marked as recipient of 4 properties, 3 rentals in the Heights, and our penthouse. My breath stilled. For a second, everything around me dulled to static. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was premeditated, intentional. This wasn't about falling out of love. This was theft with a bow. "I can challenge this," James said carefully. But he was counting on you not noticing until it was too late. These documents were submitted under a general reorganization motion, buried in a pile of quarterly filings. If you hadn't had that envelope from your cousin— "I know." My voice came out flat. I stared down at the name Ivana like it was scrawled in blood. "He's moving fast, Maribel." I sat back, gripping the pen in my coat pocket. My father's pen. My spine straightened. "How fast can we freeze every asset tied to my name?" I asked. James blinked. "Today, if we file by noon." "Then file it," I said. "All of it." There was a silence. He looked at me, really looked. "You're sure? This means court. This means discovery, public hearings, depositions." I met his eyes. If he wants a war, he'll find out who built this empire brick by brick. It wasn't anger in my voice. It wasn't even bitterness. It was fact. And it shook James more than any fury could have. He nodded slowly and got to work. While he made calls and drafted orders, I sat still in the chair across from him, staring out his window as downtown came to life. People walking, taxis honking, life continuing. utterly unaware that a marriage was unraveling 3 floors up in a beige building with old carpet and cold coffee. But I wasn't unraveling anymore. As I left his office, documents in hand, I didn't feel broken. I felt prepared. The rest of the day moved like clockwork. I stopped by the bank, signed temporary holds on joint accounts, transferred key assets into holding structures. By mid-afternoon, I had a secure copy of every document stored in 3 different places, 2 digital, 1 paper. If he came for me again, he wouldn't find me unaware. Evening fell as I drove back to the penthouse. The sun dipped behind clouds and painted the skyline in that in-between shade where everything looks more honest, less forgiving. I parked in the underground garage, walked through the private entrance, and keyed in the security code. Inside, the air was still. Too still. I set my purse down slowly and walked through the living room. Nothing looked out of place until I got to the bedroom. The top drawer of my dresser was slightly ajar, not wide open, not obvious, but I hadn't left it like that. I pulled it open further. The contents were ruffled, not rifled, like someone had tried to be careful. Second drawer, same thing. Third, my private journal was turned sideways. I looked to the bed. On my pillow lay a folded note. No envelope, just a clean, precise fold and ink that hadn't had time to dry completely. The paper still smelled faintly of cologne. Stay quiet, or lose everything. No signature, but none was needed. I stood there for a full minute. The only sound was the buzz of the fridge compressor kicking in down the hall. And then I smiled. Not because I wasn't afraid. I was. But because this was the best mistake he could have made. He didn't know it yet. But that note wasn't a warning. It was a declaration of war. I sat at the edge of the bed, the note still in my hand. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the cruelty behind it wasn't. It had Orville's fingerprints all over it, even if someone else's pen had done the writing. Stay quiet, or lose everything. It didn't scare me. Not in the way he hoped it would. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew. I was getting too close to something he didn't want exposed. I didn't sleep that night. I just watched the city lights from the balcony and let silence fill the space where trust used to live. The sun was already up by the time I made myself a weak cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen island, going over legal documents one more time, highlighting lines in yellow that might become my lifelines later. It was around 9:15 a.m. when I heard the key turn in the front door. Not the beep of the code, the key. Old-fashioned, deliberate. Orville stepped in like he still owned the air in the room. His shirt was wrinkled, collar open, and his breath carried that sour mix of whiskey and ego. I didn't stand. I didn't flinch. I stayed seated with both hands wrapped around my mug. He tossed his keys onto the marble counter. Well, well, look who's still playing house. I said nothing. He hated that, always had. He made his way toward me with the slow swagger of a man who believed he still had the upper hand. You know, he said, pouring himself a glass of water he never touched. It's funny. All those years you spent thinking you were the smart one, the careful one, and look where that got you. I raised an eyebrow. Which is? Alone, forgotten, irrelevant. He leaned in close enough for me to smell the sweat under his expensive cologne. You've always been boring, Maribel. That's why nobody notices you, and why you'll never win. There it was. The mask was off. He wasn't even trying to pretend anymore. No charm. No performance for the neighbors or the lawyers or the staff. Just venom. I looked him straight in the eyes and didn't blink. He pulled back, pacing the room now. You think because you've got some paper trail and a few sympathy votes, you can touch me? He scoffed. I've already lined up the narrative. You're bitter. You're confused. Hell, you're unstable if I need you to be. Is that what you're going with? I said quietly. He ignored the question. By the time I'm done, you'll have nothing. I'll drain the accounts, pull support from your so-called friends. You'll be invisible. He thought he was scaring me, but he was giving me everything I needed. I stood, slow and deliberate, setting the coffee mug in the sink with a soft clink. I didn't raise my voice, didn't match his rage. I didn't need to. You should worry less about making me disappear, I said, brushing past him toward the hallway, and more about what happens when everyone sees what you've been hiding. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I felt him freeze behind me, though. Felt the pause in his breathing. It was the first time in years I'd seen uncertainty cloud his face. Not because he understood what I knew, but because he didn't, and that made him nervous. I walked to the guest room and shut the door behind me. He slammed the front door on his way out 20 minutes later. The building shook just a little. I let it settle. Later that evening, I was curled up in the armchair near the window, reading old journal entries and scanning more documents when my phone buzzed on the side table. No name, just a number, and one message, one new file received. Attached was a short video, no subject line, no explanation. I tapped play. There they were. Orville and Ivana walking into the penthouse, laughing, arm in arm. She was wearing one of my scarves. He had his hand on her lower back, guiding her in like he owned the place, like I didn't exist. The timestamp read 2 weeks ago. That footage wasn't from the building's general system. It was from our private internal cams, ones only I and the original installer knew about. Someone had found them. Someone wanted me to see this. I hit pause, staring at the frame frozen on Ivana's smirk. That video was the final nail. The world was about to see what he really was. 2 days. That's how long I held on to the video, watching it on repeat like a silent drumbeat reminding me of the truth and what I had to do. I didn't cry. Not anymore. There wasn't any room left for tears, just focus. Every movement I made from that point forward was deliberate. My lawyer reviewed the footage. So did the tech who helped me install the security system years ago. He confirmed it was untouched and time-stamped. And then I picked the battleground, the upcoming family gathering, already scheduled to take place right here in our penthouse. Orville wanted a stage for appearances, for influence, for control. He didn't realize he was walking straight into his own undoing. That Saturday evening, the penthouse buzzed with voices and footsteps. The kind of gathering that always made me feel like a stranger in my own home. The space I designed, paid for, and maintained, but had slowly been made to feel unwelcome in. People I'd known for years gave me polite smiles, but I could hear the whispers trailing behind me like perfume. "They're having problems," one said near the wine bar. "Did you hear about the accounts?" Another murmured near the balcony. And there was Orville, center of attention in his tailored suit, glass in hand, working the room like a politician. On his arm, Ivana. She wore a dress I recognized from a boutique I used to frequent. Probably my old stylist, too. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, but it stretched enough for the cameras that some cousin's husband kept pulling out. Orville cleared his throat, raised his glass. The chatter died down. "I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he said, with that charming, confident tone he always used in boardrooms and fundraisers. It's been a year of transition, growth, challenge, and renewal. And through it all, I've had the support of people who matter most. His hand brushed Ivana's back as she leaned in slightly. I didn't even blink. "Ivana and I are working on some new projects together. New beginnings, you could say," he continued. "But above all, I want this home to remain a place of love and strength for our family. So let's toast. To vision, to progress." I stood. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't raise my voice or clang a spoon against a glass. I simply stepped forward and said, "If you don't mind, I'd like to share something first." Orville froze, just for a beat, but enough to see it. I walked to the entertainment console and connected my laptop to the projector, the one that normally played old home videos or slideshows during birthdays. The screen flickered, then lit up. Gasps came before the video even reached 10 seconds. Orville and Ivana, entering the penthouse, laughing, his arm around her waist. Her fingers undoing her coat slowly as she leaned into him, clear, unedited, dated and time-stamped. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone dropped a glass. An aunt clutched her pearls like we were in some courtroom drama. I let it play until the very end, then closed the laptop and looked out across the room. "This," I said softly, "is the man who called me boring. This is what he does in the home I designed, paid for, and loved." Nobody moved. Orville's face flushed deep red, and for a moment I thought he'd bolt, but pride had always been his leash. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a stack of papers, already worn from folding and unfolding. "She's manipulating you all," he said loudly, voice shaking. "These documents," he waved them in the air, "prove she embezzled funds, that she forged deeds. She's lying to you all." He passed them to a nearby cousin, who handed them to my lawyer standing near the bar. I didn't even flinch. I'd been waiting for this play. My lawyer stepped forward, holding a separate folder. "Funny," she said, flipping through it. "Because we have the originals, notarized, recorded, and dated years before any of this started, including Maribel's father's signature, approving every transaction, all of which match the county filings." She handed copies to a few relatives, just for good measure. Orville stood there, silent, as one guest held up both stacks and shook his head. "You tried to fake your way out of this?" he muttered, disgusted. Ivana turned her face away, cheeks burning. She stepped back, slowly slipping through the crowd like a ship retreating into fog. No one followed. I didn't speak again. I didn't need to. My silence filled the space louder than any accusation ever could. And then, through the hush, my lawyer stepped forward once more, this time holding a thick envelope. She opened it calmly and said, "Orville, these are the divorce papers. Everything is outlined, everything is fair, and it's time." The air in the room tightened. I reached into my purse and placed my father's silver pen on the table. "Use this," I said simply. Orville's eyes darted between the pen and the papers, then to the faces in the room, some cold, some disappointed, none supportive. His hand trembled as he picked up the pen, and in that moment, for the first time in a very long time, I saw him clearly, not as the man who once held my hand, but as the man who buried the knife. He signed. The pen slipped from his hand like it weighed 100 pounds. He didn't look at me. Couldn't. His eyes stayed fixed on the paper, as if maybe, by ignoring the room, he could pretend none of this was happening. I took the signed document and tucked it into my folder. My lawyer gave me a small nod, a silent confirmation that it was done. Ivana had vanished long before the ink dried. The room slowly emptied. No hugs, no sympathetic looks for Orville, just a blur of stiff goodbyes and downcast eyes. The man who once demanded all attention left standing alone, discarded like a broken trophy on a dusty shelf. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. It wasn't anger anymore. That had burned out weeks ago. What I felt now was clarity. Still, solid clarity. Later that evening, once the crowd had cleared and the tension had seeped from the walls, I returned home. My real home. Not the marble and glass people saw on invitations, but the quiet corners only I cared to clean. The pantry I stocked, the closet I organized, the walls I picked the colors for. It was mine again, finally. The first thing I did was open the drawer in my study and retrieve the silver pen. The one my father gave me the day they broke ground on this penthouse. "You'll build more than walls with this," he told me back then. "You'll build your future." I walked to the display cabinet in the hallway, the one where I kept his military medals, his pocket watch, and a photo of us standing in front of scaffolding and wet concrete. I cleaned the pen gently with a soft cloth, then placed it in a small glass case beside the photo. "He gave me the pen to build a future," I whispered, "and I used it to reclaim myself." The next few days unfolded quietly. Papers moved through lawyers' hands. The court made it official. Orville would remain responsible for all household expenses until the final settlement. That included the penthouse, utilities, staff, maintenance, even the flowers he never noticed I kept fresh every week. His silence was almost eerie. Friends who once bragged about golfing with him now returned my calls with sudden politeness. Some even apologized, not directly, but in their own awkward ways. "I never really trusted her, that Ivana," one said over lunch. "Men do stupid things when they think no one's watching," said another. But they were watching now. The illusion had cracked, and what was left was a man scrambling for relevance. For the first time in years, Orville became the one no one noticed. As for me, I didn't make announcements. I didn't flood social media or take victory laps. I simply got up each morning, made my coffee, and breathed in air that no longer tasted like compromise. And still, I won't lie, the betrayal lingered like a bruise under my ribs. I would open a drawer and expect to see one of his cufflinks. I'd hear the garage door and momentarily brace for his footsteps. Healing isn't clean, it's jagged, uneven. Some nights I curled up on the couch and let the memories wash over me like cold rain. I let them come, and then I let them go. But something was different now. I no longer felt small inside my own life. I no longer questioned if I had imagined the disrespect, the exclusion, the slow erasure of who I was. The world had seen what he was capable of, and more importantly, so had I. One evening, just as the sun slipped below the skyline and bathed the balcony in a soft orange glow, I stepped outside. The city stretched out below me, endless, chaotic, humming with energy. A view I used to find lonely. Now it felt like promise. "This is mine," I said aloud, my voice steady in the wind. "This has always been mine." Behind me, the silver pen glinted softly under a ceiling light. I don't know what comes next. But I know this. I will never again let someone else write my story with my tools, in my home, using my silence as ink. Sometimes silence is the loudest victory. Sometimes leaving is the only way to arrive.